Our last presentation for our American Colonies notes. We're going to focus on the Southern colonies and the backcountry. The first section, the Southern colonies, slaves and plantations. The main idea. The economy of the Southern colonies relies heavily on slave labor. Why it matters now is because the existence of slavery still deeply affected the South and the entire nation, and still exists. Still, that slavery does not exist, but the ramifications, the effects of slavery still exist to this day in our society. What were the Southern colonies? They were Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and then left out Virginia, but Virginia as well. So make sure to add into your sheets Virginia when we talk about the Southern colonies. Farming, especially warm weather cash crops like tobacco, rice, indigo, and cotton were very important. Southern colonies make their money off cash crops, which is unfortunately also why slavery prospers and why slavery exists for so long in the Southern colonies. It's the cheap, inexpensive labor of slavery allows plantation owners and Southern whites in general to make much more money than they would have if they would have paid their workers a legitimate wage and allowed them their freedom. This map here shows many of the different products grown in the Southern colonies. The South was based on a plantation economy. Bottom left, we have a rice field. In the middle, we have a tobacco field. Here on the right, we have a cotton field. Southern colonies have rich soil, so they can grow things very well. The soil is very healthy and a very long growing season. Southern crops like rice, tobacco, and cotton require huge amounts of labor in order to process and get to the point where they can be sold. A turn to slavery. So at first, when people came to the Southern colonies, they tried unsuccessfully to force Native Americans to work on their plantations. It doesn't work. The Native Americans know the land. They're able to escape and go into kind of backwoods or rural areas and live with their tribes, or to escape to parts of the New World that are not controlled by Europeans, or at least not controlled by the English. Later, they try indentured servants who would come and work on a farm for 7 years, but then they would leave to start their own farms. Often as well, unfortunately, plantation owners would work indentured servants so hard that they would often die before their 7-year term was up. So starting in 1660, Southern planters started increasingly using the African slaves. Slaves were first used in the Caribbean and South America in the New World. Southern planters learned that this is allowing those places to make money, and the system of African American slavery moves to the Americas, moves to North America, So that was the Southern colonies. Last part now is the backcountry. Settlers moved to the backcountry because land is cheap and land is plentiful. It matters now because backcountry settlers establish a rural way of life that still exists in certain parts of the country today. So here we've got our regions: New England, Middle, Southern, and then the backcountry here is behind the Appalachian Mountains. So the geography of the backcountry. The backcountry was a region of dense forests and rushing streams. It was located in or near the Appalachian Mountains. So here are the Appalachian Mountains. It's kind of this area beyond and in the Appalachians where the backcountry was. Streams and springs provide fresh water. Forests provide plenty of wood for building log cabins, and fences to keep agriculture contained, or livestock such as pigs or cows contained, or horses. So who lived in the backcountry? First European settlers in the backcountry made a living by trading with the Native Americans. Many Scots-Irish from the border of Scotland and England moved to the backcountry. It was similar in geography to the part of Europe that they came from. Farmers were next to move into the region. They found that they could subsistence farm or make enough goods to survive and have a decent life for their family by moving there. As more settlers come in, more fights with Native Americans happen, especially over land. Battle for control of who was going to control the land, who was going to plant crops on the land, who was going to hunt on the land. who was going to travel through certain territories, things like that. I mentioned the Scots-Irish, also Germans were another common immigrant group to move to the backcountry. Backcountry life. And the backcountry roads were very rough. They were basically trails, but they did allow people to move goods. Rivers would also would be used to move goods until you got to a point where the river was moving too fast or becoming rapids, or you came to a waterfall. Families generally only had themselves to depend on, and they lived on fish, game, so animals that they would hunt, deer, squirrel, raccoons. They would also plant corn as one of their staple crops. Backcountry life was hard and rugged. People were very spread out. They did not live close together, so you really had to rely on your immediate family group for survival. And that is all for the American Colonies presentation. Next, we'll look a little bit more at North Carolina, specifically some trouble and rebellions that occur in North Carolina, as well as some of the different groups that move specifically to North Carolina. Excuse me. I'll finish those up and await further directions for your next tasks.